Hi, I want to talk a little bit about this article that you're reading as part of part 2 of the Learning Styles case study assignment. I want to talk through both the design of the study presented in this article and some specific sections of this article, hopefully in a way to sort of break this article down and make it a little easier to unpack. So as a reminder, for this assignment, your job is to imagine that you're working as a school psychologist with an area school system, and that school system is considering implementing a new curriculum that involves assessing student learning styles, so using some sort of assessment to determine if students are auditory, visual, kinesthetic, or other types of learners, and then B, matching instruction to those learning styles in the hope that matching instruction to student learning styles will enhance learning for students and enhance academic outcomes. And it was that idea, that notion, that if we match instruction to student learning styles as they've been assessed, that learning will increase. It was that claim and that idea that was tested in this study. So I want to walk through the parts of this article and some of the features of this study. So first, as you read through this article, it'll be helpful to start with the abstract, which again gives a brief overview of the background of the study, its methods, and its main findings. And then to read part of the introduction section. This part here about learning styles instruction. So throughout this study, there are essentially two hypotheses being tested. The first is that matching hypothesis about assess learning styles and instruction method. So pay attention to those parts of the article. There's a whole nother hypothesis that is being predicted and assessed in this study about dual coding and the ways in which we might learn information. You could ignore that part of this study for now. We'll talk some about it in class, but don't worry about reading that part of this article or using sort of that portion of this study to inform your recommendation. Focus instead on the learning styles part of this study. So it might be helpful to read this part of the introduction where the authors talk about student learning styles, previous research about attempts to actually reliably and in a valid way see if we can determine if people are actual visual, auditory, or kinesthetic learners. And then some of the past research assessing this matching hypothesis. Don't worry about reading this next section about dual coding. And instead then just move on to the end of the introduction where the researchers present an overview of the current study. Paying special attention here to this first hypothesis. So in this section, the authors, unlike the other article we read, the authors really nicely lay out the prediction that they're making. They're essentially saying if this claim, this idea were true, they're laying out what we might expect. They're also describing essentially what two of the independent variables are in this study. And this study is a bit different than some of the other studies we've looked at, because there are two independent variables of note here. The first independent variable will deal with the assessed learning style of the students, and the second will deal with the method of instruction. So focusing here on this section, see if you can pull out what prediction, what claim is being tested in this study, what hypothesis is going to be assessed, and we'll be evaluating did the data support or fail to support that prediction. And then second, see if you can begin to determine what the two independent variables of this study are. Again, we're ignoring the dual coding part. What are the two independent variables of this study, and what are the levels of each? Read through the methods section, see who participated, what measures or questionnaires were used. As you can see here, a specific questionnaire was used to assess student learning styles. And categorize whether students are visual or auditory learners using that assessment. So participants completed this VARK questionnaire. To see if they were most comfortable learning information and having information presented in certain ways. Here, focusing on visual and auditory as learning styles of the students who participated in this study. In the results section, don't worry any about the specific statistical analyses being conducted, but just focus on what we can learn from these results, assessing this first research question, this first hypothesis, the matching hypothesis about learning styles. Focusing on this figure as the main set of results that you're going to use to, in part, inform the recommendation that you're making to this school system. And I want to just walk you through this graph briefly here. So here on the y-axis, we have the number of correct responses on this assessment that students completed to assess their learning in this study. These darker bars here represent information that was presented in visual ways, while these bars here represent a condition for which information was presented by auditory means. So these are the two different types of instruction that were delivered as part of this study. Instruction was delivered either in visual means or in auditory means. These bars here represent students who identified themselves through this questionnaire as visual learners. And these bars here represent the number of correct responses on this assessment for students who identified themselves as auditory learners. So your job, as you read this article, is to interpret these results and use these results in your interpretation of them and the author's interpretation of them in this study to inform your recommendation. Do we have evidence here that the matching hypothesis is supported, or have we failed to support the matching hypothesis? So we've made this prediction that if we match instruction to student learning styles, that'll enhance learning. Do we have evidence here to support that notion? So go ahead and read through the results section again, not paying attention to the statistics, but focusing in on this figure and the author's interpretation of this figure. And then here in the discussion section, the authors interpret the results and discuss what we can learn from them. So it'll be helpful to read through this section. Again, don't worry about the dual coding part. Focus in on the parts of the discussion where the authors interpret and discuss the meaning and importance of the results concerning the learning styles matching hypothesis. If you have any questions as you're reading or as you're completing this assignment, please email me. I'm happy to address any of those questions. If you'd like to stop by my office, please schedule a meeting with me or send me an email, and I'd be happy to set up a time to meet and also discuss the article and the assignment as well. Thanks.